Ich habe eine neue Band oder vielleicht sollte man sagen Projekt an der Hand mit dem Namen Wizard Tattoo. Sieht schon klasse aus, hört sich noch besser an und der Mann, der hinter diesem Projekt steht, der ist jetzt mir zugeschaltet aus den USA und zwar Bram The Bard. Hi Bram, how are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Now, I just got an email with the record that you are going to put out, and I was like totally floored. It looks great, it sounds great, so I said, got into the guy, and I'm glad you relented.
Well, thank you.
Now, let's start right at the beginning. Do you
Okay.
come from a musical household?
Yes, my dad played piano in his church and also guitar. So music's always been big part of his life. He never played professionally, but it was always something that he liked to do. He passed away this last January, and he was playing piano all the way up until then. That
Oh,
was his
I'm
that was
sorry
his
to hear
favorite thing to
that.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
So, did he get you into music? And you are a multi-instrumentalist, aren't you?
Yes, yes. It was actually my mother that got me into taking lessons. Now, I had always been exposed to music. My parents always listened to whatever was the radio, and they had their own bands that they liked from the 70s and 80s. But it was my mother who got me into piano when I was around 8 or 9 years old. So I did that. For probably all the way up until middle school, and then I got into playing drums or percussion in school, and later went on to play that in the marching band. So that got me exposure to both drums and piano. And then when I turned 16 and I started really getting into girls, I started learning guitar. So I met up with some friends that I went to school with, that I was in band with, and we had formed a band together. We played like Metallica and Nirvana songs. This is like, the early 90s, mid 90s. And I started playing guitar around then too. So I've been playing guitar since I was probably 15 or 16. So
But hey, come on, if you wanted the girls, you could have played the guitar.
I've always wanted to play one of those too. I've never gotten the opportunity. I've played like some toy ones before, but not a real one.
I have to ask you this. Now, you say you had piano lessons. Do you think that formal training is a good thing to do? Because there are some people who say, okay, formal training as a basis is good. Other people say, well, formal training kind of hampers your creativity.
Well, I could see both sides of that. It does put you in a box, but I think having that basic musical foundation, understanding some basic theory, some scales, time signatures, I think that's very beneficial. I think, but I do think it does kind of put a box around you. It does, and it's hard escaping that box. I really realized that when I started getting into lead guitar playing, and it was very hard for me to break out of that pentatonic blues box that everyone starts playing when they start playing lead guitar. Everyone uses the pentatonic scale, so it was very hard for me to break out in that. And then even to this day, I struggle to just come up with new inventive ways to play like solos and lead like that. But um, I wouldn't have been able to even get to that point though if I hadn't learned the scales and learned some of the different ways of playing them. So there's both sides to it. I guess too much of either could hamper or.
Mhm. Considering the music that you play and the diversity of it all, who were or are your musical heroes?
Oh well, I grew up. I went to high school in the '90s, so I was first. I was part of that whole grunge wave. So obviously, when those bands came out, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, um, and then even Metallica's Black Album came out around then, and then Megadeth had Countdown to Extinction. All those bands were very popular when I was coming up. So those are were big influences on me, and still to this day.
Mhm.
So I
Now,
would say I would say well, probably a drum hero of mine at the time, and probably not so many people say this anymore, was Lars Ulrich. I loved how he played drums from Injustice for All, and I always wanted to emulate that. and I always tried to emulate that style. It was a little hard for me to break out of that for a while.
I have to say, somebody just told me that without really knowing, Lars Ulrich was his drum hero. That was the drummer of Mummy's Little Monsters,
Mm-hmm.
the family grindcore band, because Ashton played Guitar Hero, Metallica or something like this, and it was basically Lars Ulrich's drums that influenced him in that
No,
way. Yeah.
it's great how Guitar Hero has opened up like music to younger kids too. I always thought that was great.
Absolutely. Now, what came before Wizard Tattoo? And you come from Indianapolis. What scene, if any, were you in?
Well, I don't participate. Well, I go to a lot of shows here. We have a lot of great bands. I have never been in any bands in Indianapolis. Like I said, I was in a band in high school. I played with some friends in college, and then I played in several cover bands in Indiana, more in the southern part of the state. So, but that was not original music. But we played things like ZZ Top, Allman Brothers, things that were popular at bars. So we did a lot of that.
Hmm.
Um, but so I don't this is a studio only band. I don't play out with it. I don't have other people that I play with. But we do have a great music scene here and several venues that are good for shows. So it's yeah, it's a nice scene here.
So Wizard Tattoo will never be a band. It will just be your project, right?
I don't see it ever becoming a band. I think that would be an awful lot of work to find all the musicians because I always figure I need at least two guitar players, myself playing guitar, obviously, a bass player, a drummer, and then a keyboard player too would be nice too. And that's a lot of people, and that's a lot of things to manage to to produce a show with. So I'm not saying no or never, but it not right now, no.
But how about presenting your music live?
Well, I've thought about maybe doing like an acoustic set before with just me and maybe a friend. So that might be something I might entertain at some point.
Hmm. Now, you are called Bram the Bard. I'm always intrigued, when somebody comes up with the name the Bard, because it's a medieval term. Are you a modern bard?
I like to think so, and that's kind of the direction I kind of took with this last album. I wanted to be a collection of stories, and myself as the character is telling these stories. My real name's not Bram. I'm trying to keep my musical project separate from my real life. I don't use social media personally, so I don't want to be involved in that. So that's why I came up with Bram the Bard to be the figurehead for this project. But yeah, I would say that's the intent. I'm a storyteller telling these stories about these crazy people and wizards and people that the brawler, people that get in bar fights and Dr. Beast, just crazy things that I come up with.
So the funny thing about this is that the concept and the project name are more or less identical. We're going to get into that in a second, but what came first, the band name or the project name or the concept?
Well, I had always wanted to do a band like this on my own. I think the only thing that was stopping me at the time was I was never a very good lead guitar player. And then the pandemic happened and I started working from home and I had a lot more time on my hands and I started learning scales and picked things up really quickly because I had taken piano. So I had the speed, I had the finger dexterity, I understood the notes and the scales and the progressions. So once I got into that and I could play lead, then I figured I can do everything on my own now because I could sing a little bit. I could play all these others. So that came first, and then just trying to come around with names. I bounced like a few names around. It wasn't until I got this tattoo, the wizard tattoo right here. I was my wife had been trying to get me a tattoo, get me to get a tattoo for years. Her brother's a tattoo artist and her family's all has tattoos, so I could never decide what I wanted to be my first tattoo. So I picked a wizard thinking that was really original and cool. I go and get the tattoo and I'm talking to the guy who's giving it to me um and I found out that wizard tattoos are very common which I thought was funny. So I thought, well, what if I took two common things and put them together, because wizards and band names is very common. There's so many bands that have the word wizard in them. And then wizard tattoos is another thing that's common in the tattoo world, and putting those together. So it's kind of like a tongue in cheek, like a little funny thing that I did.
Are you planning on getting more tattoos?
Yes, I'd like to.
This brings me, oh man, I didn't know that this was going to actually lead so nicely into my next question, because when I read about the concept of wizard tattoo, I was reminded of Ray Bradbury's book, The Illustrated Man. Did you ever read that? Are you familiar with it? And if so, is there an influence of that one?
No, I am familiar with the author. I have not read that book, though. No.
Because basically there's a guy who meets another guy, and that guy is full of tattoos. His back is full of tattoos. And at night, one of these tattoos always comes to life and tells a story.
Oh yeah, so it is very similar. So yeah, the story I came up with is that the tattoo started talking to the character, and it was slowly made him go crazy, and that's kind of how it spun about. So yeah. I've even thought, well, if I get a different tattoo, if I get a dragon tattoo or a monster, something else, should I make another band, based on that? Maybe, I don't know.
And one last formal thing, the sleeve of your upcoming debut LP, Fables of the Damned, reminds me a lot of the TV series Tales from the Crypt. Is there a
Yeah.
similarity?
Oh yes. I was going for that old style comic book feel, the Tales from the Crypt comic book. So I had originally looked at other artists doing the artwork for me that specialized in comic book artwork, and then after a while, I just started drawing myself. I drew a lot when I was younger and just started sketching out, and then I just put it together myself. My wife is also a graphic designer, so she helped me come up with the logo and things like that. So, but yeah, it's very Tales from the Crypt inspired.
So I read you designed the sleeve yourself. You just
Mhm.
say that your wife is a graphic designer. So are you a painter or a painting artist as well?
No, this was just a digital illustration that my laptop is a touchpad, which I never really used. And then, I was thinking I need artwork for this album, and I wanted to draw it myself, and I thought that would be the easiest way to do it. So I hadn't drawn anything probably since I was probably for 20 years. This is the first time I started getting into it. And once I did, I loved it. I've got like 5 pieces of artwork for this album. I did a piece of, even for singles I'm not going to release, I went ahead and did artwork for it just because I like doing it.
Well,
So
you can use that stuff for upcoming singles, LPs,
mhm.
EPs, whatever,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Now, we touched very slightly on the concept of wizard tattoo. Because extends to your first EP and your debut LP, tell us a little more about the concept itself.
Well, the concept of the album, the original EP was that it was kind of like a midlife crisis told through like a fantasy means. So we have a character that gets a tattoo of a wizard on his arm. He starts hearing voices in his head. Is he really going crazy? Maybe his tattoo got infected and he has an infection. He's just going mad. Who knows? And I just started thinking of stories that I could tell around that. So the first song, Wizard Tattoo, the self-titled, is very much that. And then A Wizard's Lie is more like the temptation of like that midlife crisis that people I feel my age get at a certain point, where you kind of feel like you look at your life and where you're at, and there's like this almost this need to like self-destruct to start over again. So and that kind of continued. And then Wizard Knife Fight was just like a fun song I came up with. I That was the last song I wrote. I wasn't sure what to do with it, and I just came up with some spoken word thing. I was really thinking of like, I was reminded of like Primus's Tommy the Cat when I was putting that together, and then a little bit of ZZ Top sprinkled in too. And then the last song was really just an instrumental version of the first song, just like a slower, toned down version that I wanted to cap off. For this album, I'm going more for like separate stories. So I have different stories about different characters. I have Tulsa Dan, who is the wizard who lost the first wizard knife fight. So you get to hear a little bit from his perspective. And then I also have a new character I've invented, the Brawler, who's kind of like this Clint Eastwood bar fighter character that goes around getting into trouble. And then this Dr. Beast character that I invented too, that's based on an old video game character I used to play for World of Warcraft and Warhammer too. So I always like that name, Dr. Beast. And I always liked calling myself doctor in video games, because then other people would call me doctor, and I knew I was never going to get my PhD or become a doctor, but I can be called a doctor in a video game. So that's kind of how I came up with those characters. But they're really just separate stories about different characters.
But I assume that the wizard, the tattoo concept is not really an impersonation of you as a real life person, transferring it onto that story.
No, I'm trying to. It was easier for me to write lyrics and putting myself in, just like coming up with something apart from me. There's a little bit of me in there, I would say, but it's just a way of me to come up with characters and stories, and just something that I can do. It was easier for me to write that way.
Will this concept be continued on future records?
I don't know. I have not thought about another record. I don't know how long I can carry that on. I'm going to try. It depends how well this album does, but yeah, I think that's the goal. We'll see.
Right, right. Now let's talk about the instrumentation and the musical styles for a minute. The EP has, I listened to it, of course, and the LP too, elements of rock, of metal, stoner, jazz, folk, classical, and also some vintage sounding instruments such as the mellotron. I suppose it was just a plug-in. Same goes for the strings. Tell us a little bit about how you put the styles together, the instrumentation, and so on and so forth.
Well, yeah, the mellotron was a plug-in, and the strings are all plug-ins too. But I was just really looking for like the type of music that I liked growing up. I was really into Smashing Pumpkins. They use mellotron in some of their songs. Of course, the Beatles too. I always liked the sound of that mellotron, and I wanted to incorporate that. And even if you're familiar with Elder, they've used mellotron on some of their songs too. I just really wanted to incorporate that. And I wanted to incorporate some sort of keys in it too, but not necessarily play the piano. So that's how that was added. And then the strings are just, I've always been a fan of classical music. And I mean, I was part of, I was involved in band in high school. So I'm familiar with some of those instruments. And I took upright bass in college. So it was just wanting to just bring together everything that I knew that I liked into one thing. And I wanted the songs to be different enough from each other too, where it wasn't like every song sounds the same. I don't mean to say anything badly about modern stoner doom albums, but sometimes by the time you get through the middle of the album, it's like all the songs sound the same, and it's hard to continue. I like albums where each song is a little different. I think of albums like Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy and Infinite Sadness, where they had like a country song on there and an electronic song on there. And then they had some like really hard songs on there too, but it was all split up and different. And that's kind of what I was going for.
Now, another thing on the LP that I realized, which I think is a bit unusual, is that some of the songs are faded in. And the track Wizard Van fades out in the middle and then fades in with a completely different song. So it's from hard to soft. Why did you go for that?
Well, I had another part that I really wanted to include on the album, and I struggled with where to put that part. And I really got this idea of a wizard van being like a psychedelic experience, and maybe you get to the destination and it's just, Alice in Wonderland craziness, psychedelic stuff. So it was really just me trying to find a home for that. It's like a piece of a song that I couldn't flesh out and to make into like a whole like 5-minute thing, but I thought it was good, and so I just tacked it on the end of the song. You think it's over and you're done, and then it picks back up.
Exactly. Or like the Magic Bus by The Who.
Yeah, there we go.
Now, I see that you've put everything into this record. Do you feel drained? Do you feel satisfied that you've done the EP, that you've done the LP, and you say, well, if nothing else ever happens with this, I'm a happy man? Or have you now been bitten by the bug and you want to release more stuff?
Well, right now I feel a bit drained just because I'm finishing up and going through like the marketing of it, the social media part, which I find particularly draining. Um, but I can tell you that I've already started writing songs for the next one. I've already got ideas in place for the next one, so I'll probably most likely do another one.
You talked about social media and so on and so forth being somewhat draining. However, there's the little thing of promotion. So
Yeah.
tell us how people can find you, where they can find you, how they can get your music, and so on and so forth.
Well, the easiest place is wizardtattooband.com. I have all my links on there to all my social links are on there, Bandcamp, Apple, Spotify, Deezer. I've got all those on there. So that is the easiest place.
Wonderful. And you are also one can also find you on Facebook, because I found you, and also on Instagram I found you too.
Yep. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
Well, right. So I can only say this is what a surprise this album was. You know, I got this email. I thought the name was really quite catchy. I liked it a lot. Then I listened to this and I was like blown away. So thank you very much for granting us this interview.
Oh, thank you.
However, I will not let you go with asking two pesky questions. One is, just off the top of your head at this very moment, which records or record would come to the desert island with you?
Ooh. Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. I love that album. Love it.
Absolutely. The best one. And another thing, you know how it is. Sometimes a song or a melody or a song fragment gets in your head and stays there, and you try to get rid of it, but it won't. And it just drives you nuts. Is there anything, or has there anything been lately that would fit that description?
Yes. I have been playing Grand Theft Auto Online, and the classic rock station on that is playing, is it Circle in the Sand, I believe it is? Belinda Carlisle's Circle in the Sand plays all the time. That song gets stuck in my head. My mom was a huge Belinda Carlisle fan when I was growing up. So hearing that song again, that melody, it's just stuck in my head. I'm not a fan of the song, but it sticks there.
That's what I usually go for. I always try to, get a song which is either embarrassing or how could it possibly get there, and stuff like that.
Oh, I listen to everything. I don't think I think music is so subjective. I don't think anybody should be embarrassed about what they listen to. I mean, I grew up, I was a big Kenny Rogers fan when I was a kid. So, I mean, that's hardly metal. So,
hey, come on. He told nice stories, I have to say.
yeah.
When I was a kid, a young man, I like to listen to that too. Now, the very last question I have for you is there anything you would like to tell our listeners, anything you want to get off your chest, any kind of message?
Well, let's see. By the time this comes out, I'll have a video out for the Black Mountain Pass. That's coming out on April 22nd. And then I will also be releasing a video that I recently completed for Any Which Way But Tuned. And then finally a video for Wizard Van. And I'm using AI art generation video animation to create these, and a combination of the green screen you see over here to put together these videos. So I'm excited about getting those out, and hopefully people like them.
Well, AI, the big topic just now, but of course it can be used in a very useful way, can't it? So, Bram The Bard, thank you so very much for granting us this interview, as I said, and it's a great record, great EP. So please keep making music. I personally certainly want to hear more.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Have a great one. And
right.
When the next one comes out, we'll do this again.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Thank you very much. Have a great one.